The manager of the Padres has become a friend, and texting back and forth had told me he would do this today, but then he discovered, after he actually talked to the people at the Padres, that he had a major charitable commitment that's involved him for a number of years, and he made the right decision. So I asked Mike Pomeranz if he would be willing to come. Mike graduated from Arizona State University from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, had a distinguished career with CBS in New York, went to Minneapolis, St. Paul. One of the things that amazed me looking at his bio is he anchored not one, not two, but 3 news shows a day. Wow. And when he came to San Diego, I had no knowledge of him, but the first time I saw him, I thought, wow, this guy is really, really good. And not, if I said, a cut above what we normally see here in our town, but several cuts above. And I know Dick Enberg, who was going to come today, is very high on him. I am. He's just so personable. So Mike Pomeranz, come and share your story.
Thank you, George. Yeah, thanks very much. Well, that's a heck of an introduction. I appreciate that. I don't know how much of that is warranted, but I really, first of all, I think the first word that I was telling Karen back that comes to mind, I know for you guys, is anticipation. Because you're all anticipating seeing Buddy, and now clearly you're disappointed. Except for the baby, by the way, who is absolutely charming to everybody. You know, there's nothing wrong with cheering for the second string. Just remember that. You guys, I'm going to play the room as though it's expansive, but if you feel more comfortable moving in, you can. Or you could be afraid of the pasty middle-aged white guy with makeup on. I'm not wearing any right now, just when I work. It's cool. You heard a bit about my background. I saw the Brooklyn Dodgers shirt, and my mother, who passed away in 2012, was from Brooklyn. My father's from the Bronx, and so I was raised in the 6th borough, which is South Florida, if you're not familiar with how that works, right? Every New Yorker migrates south, and that's the way it worked for me. So I was born there. Traveled around a little bit, not so much as a kid, but once I left to go to college, I went to Clemson University, and then signed a professional contract, played 5 years of pro ball, never got to the big leagues, was a left-handed pitcher and lousy. But if any of you guys, a couple of you play on the team, you know that if you're left-handed, you can play forever. Really, literally forever. I had nothing left on the ball but my hand. And they were still saying, hey, we can give you another year deal. And I thought, oh, I'll keep doing it. And then finally, I was so bad that it wasn't any fun to be out there. And that's when I thought, all right, I'll pull up stakes and I'll try something else. So I went to Arizona State and finished up my degree and got into television news, primarily because while I had an interest in sports, I wasn't a marquee name. It wasn't like I rolled out of baseball and people had any idea who I was, and those jobs are very tough to get. But in news, I had a genuine curiosity about all things. As George is saying, baseball is a part of I would imagine most of our lives since you're here, and I'm still not Buddy Black, and I'm not going to change, by the way, so don't stare at me like that. I'm not going to just turn into Buddy Black. But beyond sports, I had a fascination with a lot of things, and I'm very curious by nature, so I ask a lot of questions, and that's kind of what got me into journalism. So I got my degree in journalism, went into news, went to Colorado Springs, became a reporter, went to Knoxville, Tennessee, was a reporter, went to Chicago, and worked as a reporter and an anchor, and went to New York, as George had mentioned, and worked for the local in New York at CBS, and then as well for CBS News, the network. And ran around and had 2 little girls, and the traveling was wearing me out. Am I boring you? No, I'm just kidding. I just love to call people out when they're yawning. It's kind of the way it works. Actually, Mark Sweeney and I, my partner, we do that constantly. Somebody yawns, we're like, am I boring you? Really? So you're just the victim of the moment, sorry. Too easy. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Then I went to New York, so then we moved to Minneapolis. My wife was from there. I froze my rear end off for 6 years and then tapped out. And I said, I've got to try a little something else. So after 18 years as a news guy, I began toward the end of my time in Minneapolis moonlighting for the Fox Sports regional there, who handled the Brewers and the Twins, the Wild and the Timberwolves and all the sports there. I went into sports full time. And so that is really I think the thumbnail on my world. I don't want to give you guys a feeling I'm here to talk at you or to present any formal speech. But I would like it to be interactive. Heck, you took time out of your day to come here. I know you were anticipating one thing, and we're here together. I can talk to you about anything. So hopefully you have some questions, maybe about Buddy or the club or baseball in general or whatever's on your mind. So I just don't want you to feel like you're going to glaze over and this isn't going to be interactive, especially with such a nice, small, intimate group, and you guys are so kind to be here. So fire away. Something's on your mind. When do I think the Padres will be atop the West? You know, whatever. Because I've got that kind of knowledge. You bet I do. By the way, great job on the anthem. I'm going to say, we are going to have to recruit you. Yeah, don't go getting shy on us now. That was really impressive. Did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, could you answer that question?
What's that?
What I'm
Oh, right. Sure, yeah. Well, actually,
repeat the question.
oh, okay, sure. Yeah, the question, as I know, I'm assuming, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, is when I think the Padres will be atop the National League West. You know, I think all of us as baseball fans, you know, appreciate the grind that is a major league season, right, and the length of that season. And though at the same time, we all want instant results, and we all get frustrated when the team starts slowly. And here in San Diego, the last few years that we've been here, that early April slide just kind of sets the tone in what has sadly already become such an apathetic market, that when the expectation really isn't there, and then the team doesn't even meet the marginal expectations that are there, and then football season picks up, the market has written off the baseball season. I would have loved to have seen them get off to a better start. The truth of the matter, I think, as all of you know, is money will buy you an opportunity in much of life, but it doesn't guarantee success, and it certainly doesn't mean you're going to stay at the top. But it does give you a few more doors that are open than somebody else. And the Dodgers have some money. The Giants have some money. The Rockies just flat out have some players. And Ron Fowler and his group are, I think, trying to right the ship here and move it in a direction that puts the Padres atop the NL West. But I think, in fairness to the guys playing, it's going to take some time. It really is going to take some time. I hope that they can make an interesting run of it, and you never know what will happen because of the length of the season. And we've seen already it's a war of attrition, isn't it, really, the baseball season? Who can stay healthy and who can outlast the other guy? So here we are in May, and I'm hardly prepared to say the season's over. You just don't know. You watch all these injuries, and Clayton Kershaw out for the first month of the season. Ryu now is injured. Matt Cain cuts his finger making a deli sandwich. He's out for a few starts, right? Isn't that the way it works? So you just don't know. It's great to see the guys hit finally last night. I know for them it's tremendous relief, and I think you guys as players can appreciate what that's like. Well, what's your season? How long? 20 some odd games? All right, so the team's now well into the 30s. Could you imagine not hitting for your full season? Your full season at all. You're coming out, you're like, I was a 300 hitter last year, now I'm hitting a $140. That's what these guys are going through in a condensed amount of time. And it's a brutal, brutal grind for them. So that's a really long-winded answer to a question that I just wish I could tell you. But if I had to be honest, and you're a writer, right, Kurt? So I'm not going to be honest with a writer in the room. Of course. Well, it's on YouTube, so thanks for that. It could take a little while. I think our story here with the Padres will probably be told by the 1st of June. Because if the club slides too much further back, it's going to be a different and difficult task. You're going to be relying, I think, on too many other factors. You got to kind of be there near the front with some of these deep teams. And the Giants just lost Brandon Belt, their first baseman, last night. And while you never wish injury, clearly, on anybody, I mean, it's going to take a confluence of events to give this team a genuine shot this year. But the pitching's there. I think the pitching has been extraordinary. They can't get taxed this long, or they can't get taxed much longer like this. The offense is going to have to step it up. And you have to win more series than you lose. As cliche as that is, isn't that the way it works, really? You got to start taking 2 out of 3. You can't lay down at home. You can't go 500. But I think the club is headed in the right direction. I think some of these young pitchers in the minor leagues are probably going to have to start being used as currency. And that's the currency of the game, isn't it? It's the truth of baseball, once you get beyond your level, and the love of the game is always there, hopefully it stays with you for life, and hopefully you guys have long big league careers, but you're playing now because you love it. The guys in the clubhouse now for the Padres play because they love it. They happen to be paid for it, but they're there because they love it, and no one likes to lose. And I think some of these guys who love it and are playing well in the minor leagues will be used as currency, maybe to acquire some players that the club feels it needs.
Mike, talk to us a little bit about your 5 years, what it was like, how you traveled, where you stayed, all of that.
Sure. I went to Clemson, and I went to junior college first, as much because my mother and father were divorced when I was 8. My mother worked 3 jobs just to kind of keep us afloat, and didn't have any money, needed a scholarship. And the opportunity to pitch only came to me through junior college. I could play in the outfield, but I didn't think of myself like going to the next level as an outfielder. I couldn't run like a deer, didn't hit for power, but I was okay. I mean, I could get by at a mid-grade college as far as ability-wise, but I thought, from what I'd heard from scouts, I had a shot to play at the next level if I pitched. And so I went to junior college, went to Clemson, and was drafted several times along the way, and finally signed with the Twins in 1988. And it was a year after they'd won the World Series. I'll tell you how old I am now. When you think that, and 1988 in this room is not that long ago, right? But 1988, when I was drafted, they notified me by telegram, okay? And then a week and a half later, I received a 2-box VHS set of 1987 World Series highlights. And I thought it was the coolest thing because we didn't even own what do they call it, a VCR? We didn't even have one of those. I wanted to pull out the tape and hold it to the light and see if that would work. So I went to a friend who was wealthy, who had a VCR, and played it and watched it. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. You know, I got drafted by a team that won the World Series. So for me, a big deal. Little did I know that it takes a long time to get to that level to play in a World Series, but that was as close as I'd ever get. But anyway, went to the minors, and you guys all, I'm sure, gals, know what that's like. It's a stunning transition, especially when you go from a Division I school, where they have great facilities and funding and the whole bit, and then you go to the Appalachian League in rookie ball, and you go to a town where I went to, where Levi Strauss was the major employer in that town, and they had just shut down. So there were guys 18 to 30 on the curb with no work, and meant pretty good attendance at the ballpark, I have to tell you. We're playing in front of a decent crowd, but you know, it's 6 to 8 to 12-hour bus rides, and you're all around parts of the country you'd never been to, and you're eating fast food at a ridiculous rate, and you're just not getting healthier, and you're a young guy, and by the end of the season, you're 20 pounds heavier. Not like now, where everybody's got protein shakes and powders, and we didn't have any of that stuff. It was what you could afford. And if I remember right, my first check was, I think I earned either $700 or $750 a month. And that might be an allowance now. I don't know what that'll buy anymore. But that was my first check, and I think we received about $15 a day meal money. So it's the 20-piece McNugget deal as you go through, and then you parse it out. So you have 4 or 5 McNuggets for breakfast, and then some for lunch. And if you're lucky, you've had a few left over for dinner, or if you're fast-handed, you could steal from a buddy. And that's the way it worked. And then I moved to A-ball, the Southern League and AA, where the bus trips are 16 hours. And it's a grind. So I really have an appreciation for what these young men go through as they work their way through the system. And it's not, what we read about, right, is the player who goes from high school or college right to the big leagues with a big multi-million-dollar contract, the Bryce Harper type, the Mike Trout type, the meteoric ascent. And that's not really what it is, as many of you know. For the rest of us, the mortals, we're trying to get an opportunity. We're putting up the time, or putting in the time with the bus rides and the low salaries to try to get a chance. And for me, my chance came after the 1990 season. I had just finished up a pretty decent year for me in A-ball. And we go into spring training with the Twins, and I'm in minor league spring. And the catcher for the Twins, Tim Laudner, had some personal issues and abruptly retires, I want to say about 2-3 weeks into spring. Or maybe it was with 2-3 weeks remaining in spring training. How does that affect me? Well, typically not at all. So I'm thinking I'm going to go to A-ball, high A or double A, and all of a sudden, I'm on a plane going out to, I'm assigned to Visalia in the California League, so it's high A ball. Before cell phones were mainstream, other than Michael Douglas's shoebox in Wall Street. And I get to Visalia, and we get to Fresno, and take a bus to Visalia, And I go into the clubhouse, and I look around for my name over a locker, and there's nothing there. And then I go into the training room, and where there's some other lockers, and I look around, and there's still no name over my locker, I think. And then I get a tap on the shoulder, and they say, hey, we traded you to Pittsburgh. Well, I'm 21, 22 years old, and this is all in the same day. I had flown from Bradenton, Florida, to California on a bus ride to Visalia, to get back to Fresno, to get back on a plane, to get back to Bradenton, Florida. I come from Fort Myers, Florida, and then, in essence, Pittsburgh trains in Bradenton. So I get back to Bradenton. It's all in the course of one day. And I finally get to a payphone. You know what those are? Yeah. They have them in Cleveland still. And that's about it. And I get to a payphone, and I'm deliriously tired. I'm calling from the compound in the minor league spring. And I call my mother, and I say, hey, Mom, I just got into Florida, and I'm just rambling nervously to explain to her what happened. She says, whoa, 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 whoa. I know. I saw ESPN. I had been traded for Junior Ortiz and a couple other players you don't know to Pittsburgh to fill that role as the player to be named later. But my opportunity came because in Pittsburgh, there were no left-handed relievers in big league camp. So I went from A-ball to a shot to make the big league club. I had no business being there, but I was the only left-hander. Any guys left-handed? No, then you should become doctors. The truth of the matter is Jim Leland is the manager at the time, and they had a great team in Pittsburgh. As they were a playoff team in '91, and they had Barry Bonds and Andy Van Slyke, Bobby Bonilla, Jeff King, Mike LaValliere, Sid Bream. Gosh, just a bunch of really talented players. But no left-handed pitcher. They did have one, but he was on the disabled list. And I pitched in big league spring training, and I don't even remember feeling my hands. I was so scared. My first time, and I remember this clear as day. I remember facing the Philadelphia Phillies, and Von Hayes. And you guys, this part of the room has heard of Von Hayes. This part, not so much. Anyway, I'm seeing all the big leaguers I grew up with, and I'm terrified. And I remember not being able to feel the seams on the baseball. And it was the most out-of-body experience I think I'd ever had to that point. All the while knowing I had a bona fide shot to make this club, if for no other reason than by accident. And I remember the first hitter I faced, I walked. Par for the course for me. I was wild anyway, left-hander. Second batter, though, I got to bounce into a double play, like I had anything to do with it. Honest to God, I threw it forward as hard as I could, and I remember it was Charlie Hayes, rolled one over to the shortstop, and I remember standing there. It felt to me like I threw it, and I went like this, and I watched the double play turn around me, and then they kept throwing the ball around, and it was flying. I was like, and then finally it was coming at me, so I just reflexively went like this, and I caught it. I don't remember feeling any of it. I was flat terrified. But by then, I was able to, I said, all right, act like you've been here. Wait a minute, I never have been here. So I bow my chest like, yeah, totally coaxed that double play ball. I stepped off the mound and started to feel the blood come back to my extremities, which was relieving. Probably as much to the hitter as it was to anybody else, because the last thing you want is a kid throwing 90 miles an hour with no earthly idea where it's going, right? And they all knew that, but I thought they didn't, because I thought I looked like a big leaguer because I had the big leaguer shirt on, which doesn't make you a big leaguer, trust me. And then Charlie Hayes was up, and he was a veteran player, and no relation to Vaughn. And that should be a joke to those of you who know one is African American and one is not. But that's neither here nor there. They were not related. I faced Charlie Hayes, and I strike him out. And I walk off the field, and I get a pat on the rear by Andy Van Slyke. And I thought I had just cured one of the world's greatest ills. For me, it was a milestone moment. In the grand scheme of life, it's clearly insignificant. But when you're 20, 22, 23, it can define who you are and your moment in time. And beyond that, playing in spring training, the close to the story is the left-hander who was hurt, went all the way down to the last day of spring, and I remember they called me over. We're watching this guy throw in the bullpen, and Leland looks at me and he says, he's healthy enough to go north. We're going to send you down and play well down there. We'll see if we can't get something going middle of the year. I end up having a good first half. I get promoted, but not to the big league club. And I think that's somewhere in there where I got injured. Bottom line is I don't get called up. Make a minor league all-star team is like kissing your sister. No offense to sisters out there. But it really is. It's like you make a minor league all-star team, it's all well and good, but you're not playing the game to really have a ton of accolades in the minors. You want to get that promotion to the big league club, which I did not get. And in the end, I played a couple of more seasons, hurt my shoulder, had shoulder surgery, and decided time to pursue another line of work. Went into television, and I told you the rest from there.
Tell us, what was the most money you ever made in a year, a given year like that?
$6,000, $7,000, maybe something like that, $1,000 a month. And you guys all understand. I mean, I know you're here because you're baseball fans and you know the way the system works. I mean, you have to be on the 40-man roster, and there are various components that can make a minor leaguer, put a minor leaguer in a position to make a pretty good amount of money. I remember Les Straker was a pitcher with the Twins, got some small time up in the big leagues, and if I remember right, this is in the late 80s, he was assigned to the minor league club, but he was probably making $250,000 on a big league deal down there. But the rest of us making the minor league minimum, not making much money at all. So we're all working in the winter. We all have winter jobs. I've done virtually, I think since I'm 14 years old, back before the world made you show proof of age and you had to be 16 to get a job, I was checking groceries at a supermarket and doing all types of odd jobs. And in the winter, I had a buddy who owned a car valet service, and I was parking cars at the Red Lobster, and then there is a hedge line, and what's the youngest, well, aside from the baby, youngest person in the room? Anybody going to be there was a gentleman's club on the other side of the hedge line, and he owned both valets. So to make my money, I'd park cars. Like, how many people valet at Red Lobster? All right, I'm not going to be a retired millionaire there. So I'd park cars at Red Lobster, and then when they would close, I'd hop the hedge line and park cars at the gentleman's club, and then have my mom pick me up. How about that for quality of life? And I would tell you the name, but I don't want to embarrass myself primarily. But it was written all across the front of my shirt, which is not a good thing either. But you do what you can to get by. As I told you, I came from nothing in that regard. We didn't come from money. Now, there are people certainly in far more challenging economic situations than I came from. But you have to work. You have to scratch and claw. And I'm not qualified to do much else at the time. I hadn't finished my degree by then. And so that's kind of how I piecemealed my living.
So I don't want to monopolize this, but because it's endlessly curious to me. I know in the California State League, players live with support families. Mm-hmm. Did you do that?
I did that in rookie ball. In rookie ball, you go into these very tiny towns. Very tiny towns, you're not making a lot of money, so you have roommates, some of the other guys on the team, and you can scratch enough together enough for rent, but still tough in apartment complexes. So some of these towns would have host families who would be willing to offer up their basement for a couple of bucks, and you and a buddy would split the basement apartment, so to speak. And it was great because the people who were kind enough to open up their homes would come to you with the games that you'd get off the field, and they would have these nice pizza dinner for you, and it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of community, and it's I think it really teaches you the fabric of the game and the value of the game to the person who's not playing it, because you can appreciate somebody who's going to take even $1 to get into a ballpark to watch you play minor league baseball, right? I mean, that's a person, a fan out there with a true passion for the game. It's obviously a million light years away from the corporate structure that is big league sports. And so you love it. You come home, they give you parades, and they're so excited to see you, and you're home for a homestand, and it's a big deal, and it's a big deal for these small towns and these communities. And if you miss that on your way to the big leagues, I think you don't have as great an appreciation for the way that baseball has woven itself through the fabric of the society that we live in. You see it on all the different levels. It's easy to walk into Petco or Shea Stadium or Busch Stadium or wherever it is, your big league park, and wow, and all the corporate signage and all the big money flying around there. But go to the Diamond in Lake Elsinore, go to a minor league ballpark, and I think you'll feel the experience that much more. Not that as a player I advocate staying in the minor leagues, But it's a fabulous learning ground, and I think you just gain a greater appreciation for what the real world is like, because it's not about 23-year-old millionaires in life. And the minor leagues kind of, I think, give you that perspective.
Do we have others? Yes. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the struggle that 20 or so teams have in building a sustainable organization that can build a consistent record? And with the luxury tax now, the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Dodgers share some limited revenues with the other teams, so that teams, if they're good with promotions and they have t-shirt days and jersey days and beach towel days and bobblehead days, they can sell a couple million tickets a year and be profitable. But it seems to have a real winning team is almost a matter of chance. Like the Marlins may win a World Series one year, get rid of a lot of players, and then they're back again to a level of mediocrity. And it's really hard, even for a team like the Cubs, that may really try to invest and build a team. It's really hard for most of the teams in baseball to build a sustainable, good organization.
Well, I think we hear that, unfortunately, a lot in this market, and I feel, this is just my personal opinion, I believe that it's almost a reflexive default excuse. Because if you have a good system, and I mean a farm system and a developmental system, and I'll use Tampa Bay, I'll use Oakland, there are models in place. Miami actually has, depending on the year, and Jeffrey Luria's eccentricities aside, has a model in place that develops young people and young players. And they understand what it is to grow talent. And what they have is a continuity that the Padres have suffered from, as I think you all know. You have to be able to draft well, which has been an inherent flaw in our system. You have to be able to develop players well. And you have to be able to hold on to them at least through free agency or into their first year of free agency if you're going to compete, right? So in my mind, there's enough money in this market to win. It doesn't take a lot to field a competitive roster. It really doesn't. What it takes is the allocation of funds, in my mind, in the proper areas. And for my money, I put it into scouting and development. Because you can't, you're right. You're not going to, Giancarlo Stanton, who's in town right now with the Marlins, he's going to command 20-something million a year, maybe 30, maybe who knows, right? The sky's the limit. It'd be great to see him in a Padres uniform. Is that the most prudent fiscal move? Probably not, right? But there's no reason, if you look at the players around him, their starting five, you probably have heard this if you're following the series, their starting five in the rotation earns $3.75 million this year. That starting five is right there among the best in baseball. Top 5, top 6 rotations in baseball. $3.75 million. That's a fraction of what any number of Padres players are earning individually. They've allocated properly. Their highest paid pitcher is the guy who threw game 1. Who was it? Exactly my point. You have absolutely no idea who the first guy was, right? Who threw the first game? Jacob Turner. Jacob Turner, it makes $1 million a year. He got it from, he was playing with Detroit before he came to the Marlins. My point is, you can be competitive. The luxury tax does help. I believe, though, in the system being proper, more so than just having a windfall of cash. Because misguided expenditures just, I think, perpetuate failure. And that's where this club, I'm hopeful, gets a track right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So if the A's, the Rays, the Marlins, arguably the Giants are not a big market team in some regards, have good organizations, are there others that you would say have good, sustainable organizations other than the top 5?
Well, for the smaller dollar clubs, I mean, the model in baseball, as far as, and I speak as much as I can with other scouts, other players, other coaches, and so much of what I give to you is not necessarily of my own formulation. But St. Louis is baseball's model organization, bar none. My partner on the air, Mark Sweeney, played with the Cardinals organization, and we spent a lot of time talking to them. But when you look at finite amount of dollars, history of the game, and the way what they come up with as the cardinal way, There is a style of player they develop and a character of individual they look for that I think is exemplary, and I think baseball recognizes that. And that would be, if I put one organization above all others, I'd put them at the top. And then below that, it really comes down to owners who feel comfortable owning, but realize they need good baseball people underneath them and not to meddle. Beyond that, you've got to put the right people in place, right? Like any corporation, any business, and you have to let them do their jobs. And you can't second guess and doubt constantly. And if you are knee-jerk because you're losing your fan base, I think you jeopardize a lot of the future. But it all starts with the right hire at the top, and I think that I would put the Cardinals right there among the best that I've ever seen.
Since Bud Black isn't here, let's talk about it. So my question is, what role does the manager have in all this? How much power does he have?
Well, I think it.
You need to repeat it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lady is asking me specific to Bud Black. I think specifically managers in general.
Managers in general.
What role and power does the manager have, the field manager have, in the success or struggles of a franchise? Is that a fair paraphrase? I think it depends on the organization, but I think more times than not, and I'll say specific to Buddy's case, they have conversations, certainly. Buddy has a hand in evaluation. He tries to see as many players as possible. But at the end of the day, the field manager plays the hand he's dealt, right? So he's too busy, clearly, doing what he needs to do to start scouting the league and checking on all the other talent. He'll see the players, obviously, from the opposition as they come in. But if you're looking for advanced information on the American League or talent coming up through other people's minor league systems, the guys and in those positions on the field have limited ability to obtain that information. I hear a lot of that in this market. Fire Buddy Black, because everyone's looking for a scapegoat to this situation. And Buddy, as you know, is why I think you're here because you're educated baseball fans. He's about as good as they get in this business. He's widely respected in the industry. He's reviled by a frustrated fan base, perhaps, and I think even that's a stretch, by a very small portion of the vocal minority who don't understand you play the cards that are in the hand. And I would tell you, look at the roster. If you know baseball, look at the roster. And while these guys are trying their hardest, I challenge you to put out a team that's more competitive than he's able to do. He changes lineups constantly. He's going to the well constantly. There is no Bryce Harper, guys, right now, yet, in the system. But there are good, quality major league players who are having an extraordinarily tough run right now. So if that's the long answer to your question, I think he has a lot to do with handling the clubhouse, the cohesiveness, the ability not to lose a room to keep guys focused on winning. But I can hardly say that he's in any way even to blame by the majority of the team struggles. Nor could I say that for any manager, really.
We've got here and, yes, sir.
Just a question about you mentioned drafting. The Padres have probably gone more than 30 years picking near the top of the draft and not finding a position player since Tony Gwynn that could be considered a star player or even close to a star player. I mean, you would think just throwing a dart would be better, more successful in finding someone. We don't ever see a Bryce Harper in San Diego. Is there some explanation? I mean, do they even think about why they are so unsuccessful with position players in finding anyone that can hit? I mean, we've got 30 years of Donovan Tate, one after another, year after year, and it's just unbelievable.
It's frustrating. Yeah, the question is, and I'll paraphrase it best, it's why have the Padres struggled so much with the draft? What is it about year in and year out, right, that leads to this extraordinary run of futility when it comes to the draft? And I don't know that there's a simple answer, but I think it does go back to a continuity issue. And there are so many factors at play, especially in this market, which I think you all know far better than I do. The revenue issues, the ownership battles, the stadium issues, the divorces up at the highest end, the money flying around and where to allocate, and that we need to save money and we can't put it into the product because I've got to pay my personal debts. We'll leave it at that as I'm being recorded and that red light keeps reminding me. So I think it has been so dysfunctional. And it probably hurts, and you may in fact be right looking at me and going, hey, you know what, you're an outsider, you're not from San Diego. I would tell you that most people in San Diego are not from San Diego. But that said, there is something in baseball to its tradition and its continuity, and it's the state approach with an organization sometimes is it's to its detriment. Other times it's a positive, and there has been no clear and consistent path of success, right? So the draft became, we'll take Mike Pomeranz because he's signable, he's far less expensive, and I don't know that we can afford Justin Verlander or, you know, the guys who have all come, even last night, right? Jose Fernandez, the kid who pitched for Miami, the 21-year-old phenom, went 14th overall in a year that I think the Padres picked 9th, was it? You got to have good scouting. You've got to have the money to support it. You got to believe in your people who tell you, take Steve, take Jim, take Kurt, take Mark, and you can't question it, and you can't go, yeah, but I've got a sea of bills to pay, and I really can't pay that kid that much money. You know, now that bonuses are slotted perhaps a little differently, might change the landscape a bit. I don't think there's an easy answer to your question. I think I share the frustration. I mean, we're all looking at it in the minor leagues. I go to spring all the time now, and I have for years, and I look at every player, and while I'm no evaluator, I've played enough to know what I see, and I stand with a lot of men who are baseball men, who know these guys really well, and I ask a ton of questions like you would. Tell me about this guy's actions. Tell me how he projects. Tell me what you think. And I'll ask, more importantly, the opposing scouts. What do you think of our guys? Sometimes teams get an inflated sense of self. They overvalue their own. They miss opportunities because, what do they say? You've arrived at what you do for a living when you're comfortable looking inward and taking criticism and realizing the other guy or gal might have a point, might be right. You're not reflexively defensive saying, no, he's the best, my player's the best, my player's the best. When you're comfortable in your own skin, you can do that. When you're young and trying to prove yourself as whether it's a GM, and that's not a slight on Josh Burns at all, this is about any general manager, anybody who's new to that position. It's, I need to show that I know what I'm doing, and my selections are the best. When you've done it for a while, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not really sure. What do you think? Right?
Well, and just at the scouting level, you have to think about Albert Pujols was the 410th player drafted. So even at the scouting level, it's yes, sir.
Is there an underlying reason you think behind all the offensive players the Padres were relying on coming up short so far this season?
An underlying reason? I would say this. Remember, this is a club that I think was told to the public up front was going to have to rely on pitching to win. This is a club with the same group of guys who hit, 240, 245 for each of the last two seasons. They're hitting 215, 220-ish, on 218, somewhere in there. Don't hold me to the number today. My point is, the ceiling is only 20, 30 points away. Okay? Let's be realistic. But nobody ever said this team was going to hit with St. Louis at the outset. We'd love to. Gosh, everybody loves to see runs. I do. I'm calling the games or I'm working in the post-game show. You think it's easy to go, hey, they scored one run on 2 hits every night. No. I want to say they scored 1 run and 2 hits, but Andrew Kashner threw another gem, so the team won 1-0. That's an easier sell. But I think what you're seeing is certainly, I don't know that there's a common reason as to why, but I think sometimes, oddly enough, hitting struggles in a game that's played every day in a tightly woven clubhouse, things can be infectious. Success can be infectious. And sadly, struggles can be infectious. And I don't think there's any one common thread. But you're looking at a bunch of guys who just aren't clearly achieving even to their standard. But their standard, to be fair, I think it's unfair if you heap an expectation like the Rockies offensively. But I'd take the Padres pitching. That said, balance at the end of the day is probably better, and I think that's what the club's aiming for.
Kirk, and then here. Couple more, and then we'll come back. That'll be the last one. Kirk.
What are your thoughts, good and bad, on how replays impact the game?
Thoughts good and bad on how replays are impacting the game? Love the fact that they're getting the calls, for the most part, correct. Knew going in, because we went to a seminar where MLB and Fox meet up in Los Angeles, and you may have had your own, as MLB has toured. We knew it was going to be a work in progress. I can't stand time of game running in excess of 3 hours. It's driving me insane. I think it drives the fan away, especially folks with other more important things on their plate. So the fact that it's averaging right now, 2 minutes and change per replay, unacceptable to me. I think unacceptable to Joe Torre and the guys who run it. They're trying to whittle that down. So I'd like to see it quicker. I'd like to see it more efficient. I'd like to see the umpire and everybody sync it up so that it's a more obvious call instead of just like it's just not. I just don't like the way it's handled and delivered to the audience yet. I don't think the audience is. You know, every television audience, you're trained in a way, even subconsciously, right, to have an expectation. In football, umpire or the referee gets out to the center of the field, he clips his little microphone, he makes his proclamation, here's the call, here's why. Baseball, I would like to see that a little bit. But I think for the fact that I think it's improved the game because I get tired of blown calls making, really affecting the outcome.
Let me just ask, isn't the other part of that, the replays show how difficult an umpire's job is and how you call somebody out and the replay shows he's safe, but the matter of being safe is not even a quarter of an inch. I mean, umpires have really, really difficult jobs.
We all, right? I know who grows up wanting to be an umpire? Honest to God, I'm thinking like, you really? You wanted to be yelled at your whole adult life? You were, and well, look at you now. You look great. How did you do it? What's the secret to sustaining that lifestyle? Confidence. Well, that's why I'm not doing it. That's for sure. Because to get if you've done a great job, you're not noticed, right? That's the job of the umpire, right? If you've really done well, they shouldn't even know you're there. But inevitably, as soon as you make a mistake, they all know Jim Joyce, and Jim Joyce is a heck of an umpire. But when you make the wrong call on Armando Galarraga's perfect game and you ruin it, everybody knows Jim Joyce now. And I just couldn't do it. But it is amazing. You're right, George, just how accurate they are the majority of the time, as quickly as that game is played. And as fast as it's played at high school, and then at college, and then in the pro game, when you're down there for a big league game and it feels like it's the slowest moving sport of all, when the action really starts, it's amazing how skilled and talented these young men are and how quick that game is played. 100-mile-an-hour pitch. We just saw Ventura come in for Kansas City, throwing 100 miles an hour. Have you guys faced 100 yet? Yeah, you know what? That'll burn your eyebrows off. That's amazingly quick. And I could run it up there a little bit when I was healthy, and I remember playing against Texas in spring training, and Nolan Ryan was still playing. And he was throwing a bullpen, and I was with the Twins, and we're walking past. And you've seen so many players in your career go, and nothing really stops you to get your attention. But Nolan Ryan throwing in a bullpen did, and I watched him throw, and I thought, I should quit right now. I mean, I can't do anything anywhere close to what he's doing. I have no business being in this uniform. At the same time, I'm just merely pointing out that the umpires do an incredible job because the game is so quick.
Do you remember when, in the All-Star game, John Kruk, first time batting off Randy Johnson?
Yeah.
Johnson is 6'11" and throws up 100 miles an hour, and he comes this way, and Kruk stands in left-handed. He takes a pitch, and he turns and he walks over to the right-handed box. That's in an All-Star game.
Yeah. I played with Randy Johnson, by the way, when Randy was with the Expos, and I was in a multi-team facility, but it was the Twins, the Orioles, the Braves, and the Expos. And Randy, and this is not a joke at all, those pillars behind the camera operator right there, if I asked him to hit those doors from here, no chance. No chance. He'd hit somewhere on this wall, and it'd be about 105, and it would scare the soul out of you. Plus, he's like George had said, he's about 9.5 feet tall, so it feels like he's releasing the ball right here on your face, and it's so unsettling. Well, they got him kind of, and when I go like this, I mean like in the roll-up batting cage, he could get like this. That was an accomplishment. They never knew if he was going to play in the big leagues. I mean, he was such an imposing physical specimen and had such a gift for velocity. And he figured it out. It's been extraordinary.
But isn't that, one of the things about being that tall is it's 60 feet 6 inches. But the point of release is not 60 feet 6 inches. And there have been a lot of scientific studies done which say that if you're throwing a baseball 100 miles an hour from 55 feet, the human eye, I don't know how players do it. Yes, sorry.
No, it's the batting aspect. And this is the hometown of Ted Williams, who came up with this wonderful technique on hitting. And I just wonder why they don't maybe have short seminars or just work on it. Now, maybe this sounds naive, maybe they're working on their hitting.
No,
but there's potential there.
Yeah,
There
you're
really
saying,
is, and get some minds in there, get some people that can give them ideas.
so your question really is more to the coaching and
Right, maybe, but develop the hitting,
Mhm.
yes.
Development, I think, is you start with good quality ingredients, says the chef, right? You got to start with good quality ingredients. You have to start with the right players from the draft. And that means players who have a natural gift and proclivity to have success at this line of work. You have, right? Because you can't,
learn.
what I'm saying is, you can't have a limited capacity to apply a skill. Ted Williams, arguably the best ever at hitting a baseball. The rest of us, on almost any given day. A major league prospect, as far as hitting a baseball, probably in the middle, but is unrefined, right? So if you get the information and it resonates, you still have to be able to apply it. Because I understand hitting from a scientific standpoint. I don't have the physical skill set to apply it. Everybody needs to know their strengths, and I think with these hitters, they hear a lot of great stuff. They get a lot of tremendous input. But at the end of the day, you have to have the skill set to apply it. And these guys, I think currently, have a tremendous skill set, far more better than most. But it's still, there are a lot of, I think, points between A and Z. And I just don't know that they're able to connect the synapses yet.
And
it's
Ted,
just-
and
it's
about
tough.
the point about Ted Williams, Ted Williams said that hitting a baseball was the hardest thing you could do in sports, that hitting a round ball with a round bat. And Tim Kirchin of ESPN, in his book, Is This a Great Game or What?, which I think is the funniest book I've ever read, but he tells about Tiger Woods being taken to a batting cage. He was hanging out with Carl Yastrzemski for whatever reasons, and they go to a batting cage, and somebody is throwing pitches, not hard, just throwing pitches to Tiger Woods. And in that whole session, Tiger Woods never hit a single ball. Hit a stationary ball as well as anybody who ever lived, could not hit a moving ball.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, the same way. And what's
Yes,
interesting
right.
too, to that point is, I try to play golf too, and it is nothing more frustrating, right? The ball is stationary. They don't even let you yell at the guy hitting the golf ball, and I still can't hit it. And then in baseball parks, the kid's trying to hit a baseball, like Georgia said, coming 100 miles an hour and moving with a bat this big in diameter, and the world is screaming at him, and that's okay. Like, why aren't they quiet at baseball? And you should be able to scream at golf because the ball's not even moving. I don't get it anyway. It's an old, you can be too smart. You mentioned at your opening remarks, it's the intellectual's game, so to speak. But you can be too smart almost to play the game. You almost have to be reflexive and see ball, hit ball. When teams are struggling, that's where sabermetrics come into play. All the new science. And I love some of that stuff because it's great barroom chatter. But let's be honest. Numbers are what you look at when you're losing. When you're winning, you don't care about statistics, individual or otherwise. I don't care about WAR and FIP and XRA and work and all these other acronyms for these ridiculous stats. I'm going to be as cold and honest and this again, my opinion. Statistics are where losers focus. Winners, in my mind, there's only one number that matters, and it's the win-loss record, right? And if you want to put in a second number, it's runs. The only two numbers in my mind that matter, runs. I have scored more than you.
We're going to go
Period.
to the last question. We'll let Karen have the Babe Ruth, 714 home runs, struck out over 1,400 times. It's tough. Yes, sir.
Well, we've been talking about hitting and the Padres' lack of it. Did you think with the quality of pitcher that's been coming up in the league and just the change in baseball going away from home runs that we're just going to see less offense? Because every pitcher that comes up now is just filthy.
Yeah, that's a great question. The question is basically if you think some of the offensive or woes or softening league-wide has anything to do with the incredible crop of young pitchers we're seeing with these great arms and all this filthy stuff. Do I see that as a trend? I think it's twofold. I think we're all in, aside from the infant. By the way, you're not the first person I've put to sleep in a speech. I think there are a couple of reasons. One, I think you're seeing the crackdown on performance-enhancing drugs. And two, you're seeing these big, young, strapping pitchers able to throw a ball 100 miles an hour. I'm curious to see how long that'll last because with that said, 15 Tommy John surgeries already this season. I don't know that the human body can sustain that. ESPN, the magazine, has a great article out right now comparing the torque of throwing a baseball to holding let me get this right, 60 pounds basically, 5 12-pound bowling balls on a chain. I'm left-handed, so if you could imagine 5 bowling balls hanging off a chain that I'm holding the handle to and slinging that forward, that is the torque that they estimate goes into the elbow when pitching a baseball. I don't think that's sustainable, sadly, because I love watching these guys throw. I think the fans are energized when you see Andrew Kashner, these guys throwing 100 miles an hour. I think the combination of the two, hard throwers, tightening of the rules, performance enhancers, it's kind of even the playing field. I think I grew up in that era, like you guys when you were very young, with the huge offensive numbers and the Sammy Sosas and the, almost comic book numbers. I don't think that was the game. Clearly was not the game prior, and I don't know that that'll be the game going forward. I think you'll see middle ground. I don't know that sustainable 100-mile-an-hour pitchers are there either. And I think an offense that's scoring 3 to 4 to 5 runs a game is going to be a good offense. That's going to be considered a good offense. That's what the game really is, right? The game isn't to compete with football scores. That's the beauty of it. It should matter that it's 2 to 1. It should matter that it's 3 to 2,
May I just basically disagree, because the greatest baseball game ever played was when the Phillies beat the Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field 23-22. Last question to Karen.
All right. Mike, thank you so much for coming. You've been so entertaining.
Oh,
and I'm not even that big a baseball fan, but I'm entertained.
Thank you.
But I know you have an eye for the human interest element. And looking at the Padres roster right now, who is there? Who's the man of character? Who's toiling in? Who's putting the extra time? Who has a good human interest story that we may not know about?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that when you see a young team too, and the Padres are, and if they're not maybe young they're not 20, 21-year-old guys, but they're young in the majors. They only have a season, maybe 2, maybe 3 years experience. You're afraid to get sent down with every passing day, correct? That's just natural. So whether you're charismatic and gregarious, you're going to temper that somewhat until you feel established and comfortable in your own skin and know that you're not going to be sent down tomorrow. So what you see, unfortunately, isn't what I have the luxury of seeing. And that's one of the beauties of being intimately involved with any club or in the game. And that is, I see these guys when they're relaxed and away from the field, and they're not afraid because a microphone or a camera is in front of their face. And so there are wonderful human interest stories. I think we're all familiar with Yonder Alonso or Yasmani Grandal and coming over from Cuba, and Jed Jerko from the hinterlands of West Virginia. Will Venable and the work he does with the Monarch School and Nick Hundley, guys and their families and their wives who are involved in the community. I think that there are a bunch of stories like that. We try to get as many of those out as we can, but Karen, as a former reporter, you know that it's a two-way street, right? You may hear about that great story, but then when you say, hey, let's go tell it in print or TV, they're like, oh, you know what, I'd rather not. So these guys oftentimes, I think, are they're a little uncomfortable with it. They're protective. They're shy. They don't want to. And when a team is struggling, they don't want that type of attention. They want, it's team first, winning first, and so you don't see as much of that. But there's nothing that I'm aware of that I'm allowed to share.
Like, who inspires you when you look at it, the work ethic, and you just think,
wow. Honestly, my work for my line of work, every major league player, what I get to see is what you guys already know, and anybody who's played a game for a living knows. The level of physical and mental work it takes to excel, especially in a game of failure that baseball is, to me is extraordinary, because it's absolutely the single most difficult thing to me to walk in. Any surgeons in this room? Okay, so you're a surgeon, and 7 out of 10 of your patients don't make it. And they consider you the best surgeon in the city. Okay?
You're going into the Hall of Fame.
You're going into the Hall of Fame of surgery. That's right. Or you're a lawyer. Any lawyers? Right? You lose 7 out of 10 cases. Awesome! That's flipping amazing. I don't know of another line of work. There is none to my knowledge where failure is the game. And yet all of us have this expectation that the people we're paying to see are somehow going to buck the norm, Shin-Soo Choo, who's now with Texas after being with Cincinnati, had an on-base percentage last year of over 400, 420 something. I don't know. Like I said, not totally fixated on the numbers. 420 something. Best in baseball. 420 something. Failed 60% of the time. You know? I mean, that to me is why I have such an appreciation for what they do. I'm going to be as objective and as critical as I feel I'm qualified to be. I'm not the be-all, end-all authority on squat, never mind baseball, but I can tell you this. It's going to be awfully hard for me to criticize somebody who's the best in the game and they fail 7 out of 10 times, and I can barely get myself arrested out there, brush my teeth properly. I certainly couldn't do it with a greater success at level. What the heck was the question?
Hasn't this been absolutely wonderful?
You guys have been kind, and I know, like, I go back to my original point is, you came in here with an expectation it was Buddy Black, so let's focus on the disappointment. Use the word. I appreciate your tolerance, I really do, and your patience. And next time Buddy's here, I'll be getting to sit in the back row with you guys, and I'll appreciate that too. So thank you.